Hello and welcome to another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. I'm Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu, and how magnificent is early spring. I love it. Spring is just fantastic. That turning of the weather, that warmth that comes, but especially this early part of spring when we get to start seeing all that beautiful new foliage come out. There's some flowers. Maybe they've started to drop off now, but you see some of the fruiting trees, some of the pruners starting to get their little bits of fruit starting to form. It's just really exciting. Looking at even your conifers, you start seeing your junipers with all that beautiful new foliage that's starting to grow. Your pines, you've got the candles starting to stretch out, and everything's just coming back to life. But there sometimes can be a downside, and that's what I want to talk about in this episode of the podcast, is emergency action that you need to take during early spring. You may or may not have, hopefully you don't, but you may or may not have some issues with some trees when that new foliage comes out, and you might start seeing things start to wilt, start to blacken. Something starts to happen. Doesn't look quite as vibrant as what it should. I thought rather than focusing on all this positivity, I'd just see if I could be a bit more practical and give you some advice or some steps to take that I use whenever I get a tree in my care, or I get asked for advice on a tree that sort of has some damage to it, or it's just not quite right. Especially, it normally raises its ugly little head very early in spring, when that new foliage just sort of starts to push out, starts to grow, and then something can happen. So I thought we'd focus on some practical steps that we could use, and also just have a chat about some trees. Maybe by now you've realised also that there was a few trees you should have repotted that you didn't, and I've just got a bit of a process you can go through to help you get through the next period, which is the summer period, which is the hardest one, but get you through the next 9 months, or 10, 12 months, whatever it's going to be, until you can safely repot those trees. I wouldn't suggest repotting trees that have popped and grown and they've taken off, and it's possibly too late for repotting to occur. But there is some steps that you can take quite safely that will help you get that tree to the next level. So this is the the practical emergency action for early spring podcast. So get a cuppa, you'll need it for this one. I find this early spring period is really exciting. Seeing those trees wake up, holding your breath for the ones that don't, but it can be a bit nerve-wracking for me too until the trees have found their mojo. They've just got going, and you've made that first prune after they've pushed their foliage out, or whatever process you're using for those trees to maintain or manage their growth. Because this early part, I find that, as sometimes, not always, but sometimes with certain trees, I find that they push their growth. It looks fantastic, all looks good, and I come around the next day and suddenly go, hang on a minute, that looks a little bit different today. It doesn't have that same appearance. And then the next day I walk out there and go, oh, hang on a minute, now there's some things going wrong with that. And the telltales for me that something's not quite right with the trees can be the blackening of the tips of the new foliage that you've got. It might be that the new foliage is starting to droop, even though you look at the tree and go, well, it's still wet. Like I can still feel moisture in there. The tree shouldn't have drooping foliage, but it clearly means that something's not happening right. Or it could be, a change in colour of the foliage, and that does happen. Like don't panic. The new fresh coloured foliage for spring is often a different colour from when it hardens off and gets ready for summer. It may start a reddy colour depending on the variety and move towards a darker green. So there's that sort of thing. But and one of the theories that I heard, which I think I've raised earlier years and years ago on the podcast, is one of the beautiful theories I heard as to why the foliage is red and then turns that green colour is because, I don't know whether insects can see it, but that's what I read anyway, and I love it, that insects see red as a warning sign, so they stay away from it. It helps protect that foliage from infestation or from pest attack because of the colour. And then once it's matured and it's tough enough and can look after itself, then the foliage starts to change. I know that's Not entirely 100% accurate, but geez, it's a nice story. So let's just stick with that. But the other thing that you'll see is a change in vigor. You know, they sort of jump out of their skin, get going, and all of a sudden, hang on a minute, let's just slow down a little bit for now, and things maybe don't happen quite as quickly around the entire tree as what you'd be expecting, and things are out of whack. So there's a few reasons for these different things, and as I mentioned, the weather across this beautiful country of ours is varying drastically. It changes all the time. But that blackening of foliage could be from some late cold weather. You know, maybe the new tender shoots have been frost damage, or it could be, you know, they've got too hot, too cold, whatever it is. That new foliage is so sensitive and so delicate that, you know, the protection, the care that needs to go into them as they are starting to grow, you've got to be really careful. There's a balance between exposure to get that hardening off of the foliage and that waxy coating that's so important for the summer period, but then protecting them from the extremes. So, you know, if it's too hot or it's too cold, you've got to be really, really careful. And it does mean sometimes, you know, the shade cloth comes out and then goes back, and then comes out and then goes back, and you know, it's painful. I get it, but it's often one of the issues that you'll see. And if there is a possibility that you're in an area where there could be that cold snap, and I think this generally applies to everybody at this period of the year, as we are going through this change of season, especially down the southern part of Australia, as we go through this change of season, I wouldn't recommend watering late in the day. You know, I'd always recommend an early mid-morning sort of water where the trees are sort of just waking up. There might have been dew overnight. It might be, you know, the trees might feel like they're a bit wet in the morning, but, you know, that mid-morning, you know, for me, it's around 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, give the trees a nice solid water, and then check them, you know, about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but I'm never applying water late in the day, sort of past 4:30, 5 o'clock, because, you know, that water sitting around, if you do get a really cold snap, it doesn't need to go below zero, but if you do get a cold snap, that water being on the foliage can contribute to the damage that you start to see. So I'm mindful that with my watering, I'm pushing things to the early side, let the tree use it, you know, throughout the day, but then make sure there's nothing sitting around on the foliage, so I don't have to consider that as a bit of an issue. So cold snaps, that's one thing. The main reason where I get nervous at this time of the year is fungal issues that tend to show themselves on new plants. It might be that you've got a heap of seeds and they've started to grow, they look great, and all of a sudden they start to cark it. Yeah, by all means, search the internet for reasons and look for photos as to what it is. But these fungal issues can be bloody painful and hard to treat. You should know I do stay on the front foot when it comes to my fungal issue management, and I'm preventative spraying, as you know, not every day, but I do on a regular basis spray fungicides to make sure that I'm in front of it. But that doesn't mean it's going to go away. It doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It doesn't mean it's something that's not already in the tree, that's been there for a bloody long period of time, and I'm just, you know, holding off the inevitable for damage with that tree. But I do have a process that I go through when I do think there's a possibility that it's a fungal issue. I'll look to isolate the tree as much as I possibly can. Look at applying a fungicide to it quite regularly. You know, obviously read the instructions on the pack for the brand that you choose. But I do like things like Mancozeb. That's one that is a go-to for me. That I've found to be, for my environment, for my trees, for my blah blah blah, the asterisks in the corner of that comment. But I find that's quite good for me, both from a preventative as well as a management or treatment type issue. So I'll look to isolate the trees, but also I'm pretty keen to look at the trees that are around that affected tree as well. That bonsai that's showing some kind of fungal issue at this early part in spring, because I want to make sure that the other trees in that area haven't been affected. And hopefully it's not, but as a preventative, once I find the issue somewhere in my yard, everything gets a spray with the fungicide just to be safe, just to stay on the front foot. I don't want to have to deal with issues somewhere down the track. If there is a fungal issue brewing, it can take a while before it shows its ugly little head. So I'm trying to make sure that I'm staying on the front foot, and assuming that trees in that close proximity maybe have got the same issue as well, but maybe they're a bit stronger. Maybe they're not going to show it till next year, but it certainly puts me on guard to make sure that I'm on top of things. I also look to make sure that trees don't stay too wet. This is where you've got to be really careful with your watering at this time of the year. Watering is so difficult. It's so hard to get right. Watering, from here to 5 minutes down the road to the other side of the country, it's all very, very different. And even trees from one side of my yard to the other, same variety. Some have woken up and are looking at almost a partial defoliation because they're so thick with foliage, whereas others are just starting to move their buds now of exactly the same species, exactly the same tree. So it's been, I'd say it's weird, but I think it happens every year. But it just freaks me out that I'm sometimes looking at the same variety, even on the same bench, thinking, geez, are you alive? Yeah, you're slowly moving to, my God, I'm going to have to give you your third haircut and start removing foliage because it's going to get too dense in there and it's going to start getting dieback on the inner areas of that tree. So I do try and make sure that I've isolated, that I've inspected the area, that I've treated the tree that's affected definitely, but also look at spreading the love and the treatment to other trees around that area, but also really staying on top of the watering to make sure that they're not staying too wet. That's often a sign to me if, let's say I've got 5 trees on a bench and 4 are regularly needing water, but one of them is staying wet, then that's a signal for me that there's something happening with that tree. The root system, maybe the tree hasn't woken up, which is an easy explanation. So it's not drawing as many fluids through the system. Foliage isn't photosynthesizing. It's not transpiring. It's just really still in the late dormancy period. But if the foliage looks the same, maybe it hasn't got the spring in its step that the others have got, then I've got to be really careful with that tree and suddenly go backwards and say, okay, what's the reason for this tree being a little bit slower? And I've got to make sure that I'm on top of watering, whereas, the trees beside it might need it once, twice a day. Let's say it's 1.5 times a day they're getting watered on average. That tree might be, every day and a half it's getting watered. It doesn't need it more than that. So I love the automated watering systems. I think that they're great for when you need them in certain times that you're not around. But just be careful if you're relying 100% on that, as opposed to you getting up close and personal and walking around with a hose in your hand and saying, yes, water. Oh, hang on a minute, no water. I'll come back and check that one at this afternoon at 2:00 after lunch. I'll just see whether it's dried out a little bit more. Maybe the tree needs to be moved to a different spot in the yard. But anyway, fungal issues, this early part of spring, I'm really on top of looking out for them because this is when they start to appear. The other thing that I find can cause an issue to the foliage is pests at this time of the year. And I am all over them. I am as much on the front foot as at this time of the year as I possibly can be, with using some nice systemic insecticides, trying to stay ahead of the damage, because it will come no matter what you do. There will always be a pest that gets onto your tree, and it's not the end of the world. Trees can handle it. Trees can handle bugs. They can handle aphids. They can handle scale. They can handle woolly aphids. Whatever the environment throws at them, if they're strong, they can handle it. But if they're not, if there's something that's maybe not quite right with that tree, then something else will happen to it. It will start to get weaker, which makes it more vulnerable, which is the part we've got to be really, really careful of. And it's not enough to simply say, you'll be right, I don't need to worry about treating you or doing this or whatever. It's that you need to say, hey, listen, I know that you're in a volatile position. You're in my care, my control, and I'm the one that's going to look after you. So you need to stay on front. And this is where, I put that video up on social media about stepping up on top of the bench to pinch out a maple. It is really important to look at them from all angles. These little buggers, pests can hide anywhere on them. You'll see it in the leaf. You'll see leaf damage. You'll see definitely loss of vigor. Look for ants as well. Ants, or even look for predatory insects. Your praying mantis, your ladybirds, lady beetles. When they are around, they're not there because they love the look of your tree. They're there because they're feeding on something. So you can often see a praying mantis because they're so big. You can often see the lady beetles because they're bright red. They're all orange or whatever colour, yellow, whatever they are in your environment. But they're far more visible and they sort of put a smile on your face when you see them. Go, good on you, it's great. But then I always go, okay, what are you here for? You're not just passing through on the way to the neighbour's veggie patch. You're here because there's something that you're feeding on. And more often than not, I can't see. Especially ants, you look around for ants, you have to hunt. If you start seeing sooty mould on your branches or on your structure of your tree, you may not think there's ants around, but there more than likely will be. So I'd be not just looking to deal with the ant issue. I'd be definitely looking to say, what are they here for? Because they're not there for a party. They're there because there's food. And if there's food, then your tree suddenly has got a bit of an issue. And ants are a great telltale because they'll often go just to one tree. They don't go to every tree that I've got on my bench. They'll go to one. It's like, geez, okay, so the rest of them are okay. But this poor tree here has got some kind of an issue with it. So for me, that's when I do see issues with foliage, when I do think that there's something that needs to happen, or that vigor has suddenly dropped off that was there a few days ago. Now's the time to act. Don't leave it longer. Don't think it's going to get better by itself. It needs your intervention. It needs you to step up to the plate and take control of the situation. And there are a couple of things that I do anyway when I'm walking around the yard and I see there's a problem. Right, so at this time of the year, as I walk around my yard and I'm doing my inspection on a very regular basis, because I love spending time with my trees, now's the time that every now and then I'll walk past the tree and I'll get a bit of a shiver, a bit of a chill up my spine, and I'll say to myself, you really should have repotted that tree. Yeah, look at it. The vigor isn't there. It's okay, but it's maybe not as strong as what it should be. The growth that's coming out is nowhere near as vibrant as what you'd like. And I suddenly give myself a bit of a kick in the pants and say, you really should have done something about it. And I go through the thought process, well, maybe I could repot it now, but I know it's too late. As for me, my simple rule with repotting is once that initial burst of spring is spent, once the buds have opened, once things have started to push, it's too late for repotting. Physically, you can repot whenever, but the tree's already started to diminish its stored resources. So getting in and repotting at this time of the year, for me, is just off the cards. And if you do it, if there's online advice that says, hey, you can repot any time of the year, well, that's up to you. But from my point of view, my perspective, and my experience, I've always found doing that sort of thing comes at a cost. And you may not see it now. You might think, I got away with it. That's great. But sooner or later, there's a cost to doing the wrong thing by your tree. So for me, I know that I'm stuck. I'm in a position where I've got this tree that's not as strong as what I want, which means it doesn't matter how much fertilizer I give it, I won't be able to build the strength up on this tree because there's just no capacity for new roots. I've done the wrong thing. And if you find that you've got that in your yard, then there's a really simple technique that I use. And I do this in autumn too. If I get through the summer period and I see that there's a tree that's just been flogged, it's just not doing well, and I think I've really got to repot this thing. The water's not being getting into the tree system. I have to dunk the tree on a continual basis. Then this process applies at that time of the year as well. So during this early spring period, I try and do it. You might be able to leave it a little bit later into spring as well. But for me, now's the time that I really notice that there's that lack of vigor with the trees. So I'll try and fix it now, because I really want things to be settled and cruisy and in control completely before it's hot. In another 3-4 months, the weather will be very different to where it is now. And you know it. You've been through it. You've seen it for your whole life. You know that when summer gets here, we might have mild summers, but then during a mild summer can come an extreme day. And it's one or two of those extreme days that terrify me, that I plan so much for, that 2 or 3 days in the mid 40s with strong northerly winds, when you know it's going to be doing damage to your trees. That's what I work so hard for with root strength and root control and fertilizing and strength building in the trees. So if I get that gut feeling now that I've missed the boat, I've left it just that 1 year too long, that I should have repotted this thing. It may be even that you repotted it last year and you couldn't repot it this year, but you know that the thing started to push itself up out of its pot. You're going, well, I really need to get more than 1 year under the belt for this thing. But you look at it and think, it probably should have been repotted. Then there's a technique you can use. So I'll just run through it step by step. So you gently rake down the top layer of the soil. And by top layer, I'd say, maybe, depending on the depth of the pot, of course, but, maybe 1 centimetre to 2 centimetres in a 5 centimetre deep, 6 centimetre deep pot, something like that. I'd take the top centimetre and a half, 2 centimetres out. Use your root rake, but generally it's a nice chopstick for me. So it's something that's very light, very mild. I know that I'm not going to be, absolutely gouging out the roots, because that's not the idea. All I'm trying to do is just remove some of that soil that's in there. And when you do it, you'll find that there's some surface roots that are there. I'll prune some of those as well, as long as they're not massive, significant roots. If they're the finer roots in that top 1 to 2 centimetres of soil that I'm removing, as I remove it, you can use, if you've got a wet dry vacuum, something like that, if you can have it on a mild suction, then as you're removing, sort of suck out the soil around the area as well. Keeps it nice and clean, and you'll get through it a lot faster, because otherwise, as you're scratching out the dirt, you've got to sort of rake it out with your hands, or use a broom, or a little bonsai broom or something like that to sort of flick the particles out. But having a little vacuum there makes life a hell of a lot easier when you're doing it. So just generally work your way right the way around the tree. Be quite mild with it. Don't be aggressive. You're not looking to destroy everything that's there. You're looking just to take the soil particles out. So then when that's gone, you give the roots a light prune through that area. And then the bottom section of the pot, whatever you've left in there, the bottom sort of 3 centimetres or whatever it is, I'll get a Phillips head screwdriver, and I'll put it in there, and I'll start aerating that soil. Start breaking up a little bit. So you're not jackhammering this thing. You're not trying to destroy the root system that's below that area. You're not trying to destroy the new roots that are formed, particularly around the outside edge of the pot that are there. All you're trying to do is just aerate a little bit to let some air water transfer happen. To when you're watering the tree, to allow the water to run through. And the distance between that aeration, of course, it depends on the size pot, but generally, if it's a medium to large size pot, then I'll have the aeration maybe 4 centimetres apart, something like that, 3 to 5 centimetres. And if it's a really small pot, then obviously a little bit closer, but don't make it that they're within a centimetre of each other, just a little bit further away, because all you're trying to do is just open it up a little bit, give the roots that are in that lower section an area to grow, but also to allow that water to transfer through there and not let it stay boggy wet either. This is one of the main issues I find, that when a tree's retaining too much water at this time of the year and it's not got that vigorous growth, often it's because it should have been repotted. It hasn't, and the root system just isn't using it, and it's just staying bog wet in the cooler weather, if that's what you've got in your your backyard, but in the cooler weather. So aerating it a little bit helps for that water to transfer out and then to evaporate as well. So that's the next thing I'll do. Then once I've loosened the roots of the soil. Sorry, I've cut back some of the roots. I've aerated the lower section of the pot. Then I'll fill up the top section that I've removed with nice, fresh, new soil. The pumice-based mix, fill it right up. Make sure it's nice and level, not mounded up. Just keep it nice and level to the edge of the pot. Then put on a very light layer of sphagnum moss that I've put through a sieve, just to help the roots grow to that area. It'll give you a telltale as well to let you know when to water the tree, because they'll start to dry out. But it also, main thing is to allow those surface roots to grow right to the surface of the soil. Whereas if it's too open, the roots won't grow in that section and it'll stay very loose, that new soil that you've put in there. So put that on, give it a nice water like you would after a repot. Just see if things are starting to flow a bit more through the bottom holes of the pot. Hopefully they are. You might find that it doesn't. It might fill up like a bit of a pool, but then it should filter down quite quickly after that. And then after that's all done, I'll use sea salt on the tree. Normally I'd be waiting, but because we've got that section of root mass that hasn't been damaged, hasn't been manipulated in any way, I'll use sea salt straight away. As far as fertilizing goes, though, I'd hold off fertilizing for a few weeks after doing this. Just let the new roots start to take cold, let the tree catch its breath a little bit. Hopefully you start to see an increase in the growth of the tree or the vigour of the tree, especially, and water uptake. That should all sort of get the tree's engine going. And then once I know that that's happening, then I'll gently introduce fertiliser. I'd probably give it 1 tea bag at the start, and then into the next month of spring, I'd start putting 2 bags on there to really try and build it up a little bit, because the tree's been behind the 8 ball, or possibly hasn't had the capacity to take up foliage for quite a while. So at this stage, I wouldn't be looking to do excessive pruning on the tree. I'd be looking to build the tree's strength up with some new root growth, let the foliage push out a little bit. So do that grow cut method of managing the foliage, but put some good fertilizer on there, and hopefully you start to see an increase in frequency of watering with this tree as it does start to take off, and those new roots get that beautiful area they get to grow in as well. So that would be the one. But the most important thing when you're doing this process, when you've got this tree that you should have repotted, and you're forcing yourself to do something which is not great, it'll get you through. The most important thing you've got to do is make a note for next year. Make sure that you do not miss this tree being repotted next year. You get away with it once. Will you get away with it twice? Probably not. You'll start to see impacts. This process is designed to really get you through this summer, and then you take the appropriate steps to say, okay, now next year I'm going to be doing this. This is not the norm. This is not what we do on a regular basis. It's what we do when we're forced into a corner because we've done the wrong thing. That's really what it comes down to, is you've done the wrong thing. You've missed a repotting deadline for whatever reason. It's too late to do repotting. You can't go through the entire process. So you do a partial clean out, give it some new area for these roots to grow. Let the tree maybe get an extra 15-20% up on its strength as to what it would have had if you'd left it alone, which will be more than enough to get through this summer period. You may need to flag it for summer protection as well, knowing that it's not going to have the full root growth or full root capacity that it should to get through. So you sort of flag it and say, okay, well, it's going to go into a semi-shaded area, maybe a slightly more protected area during the peak period of the warmth that comes in summer, and just get it through. And then May and autumn, look to boost it up a bit more with fertilizer. But anyway, for right now, early spring, they're the emergency steps that I'd be on right now. We're what are we? End of the first month. We've still got 2 more months of spring to go. This is normally when I see damage start to appear, and it's time to take action. Hopefully you don't have any of those issues and your garden is thriving. You've got birds chirping in the trees. You've got bees buzzing around on all the flowers in the garden. The lawn's getting mown every 3 days because it grows out of control this time of the year. But if you do, and that's why I want to put this all on record, I suppose, is that if there is ever an issue with your trees and you do start to see it in early spring, then this is a roadmap, I suppose, that you can use. Some steps that don't guarantee success, but they're the things that I would do for my bonsai in my yard if I had any of these issues start to occur. Fungal issues are a nightmare. They are very difficult to manage. As I said earlier, I do try and prevent them by making sure my trees are strong and healthy, making sure they're in a really open area, getting lots of the air and rain and being in that exposed area, that they're not sheltered away where the fungal spores can come in and take hold and start causing damage. And I try and stay up with my preventative spraying for fungal issues as well. Doesn't always mean it's going to work. It may be something new that's been introduced to your microclimate and your microenvironment that then suddenly starts to affect other trees. Definitely persist with it. Don't put them in the green bin just because you've got an issue, but make sure that your housekeeping is good. Make sure that you've removed all the fallen leaves that are sitting around the place. Make sure when you're pruning your trees, you don't leave it sitting on the bench. Make sure that you're doing as much as you possibly can to provide an environment where your bonsai is going to thrive. And when it does go wrong, if it does go wrong, then there are steps you can take. Doesn't mean it's out of the woods, but it's definitely better than doing nothing. Seeing this sort of damage at this time of the year and putting your head in the sand, thinking, it'll get better somewhere down the track, doesn't help, and it doesn't work. So staying up with them. And the best way to do all this, as I always say, is get up close and personal with your trees. Spend time with every single one of them. Look if there is a damaged tree or an affected tree. Look at other similar species of that tree and see if they've been affected in your yard as well. It could be an environmental thing coming over the neighbour's fence that you need to be aware of. You can't do anything about it, but being aware of it is better than not. So it's nice to spend time with your trees at this time of the year anyway. I love it. So give your trees a cuddle for me. Thank you for listening in. I do appreciate the support. This was episode 39 of season 7, if you can believe that. It's amazing. The year's flying past. We're into the last few months of the year, and it's a good time to have bonsai, I tell you. Makes you smile every single day, and you're very fortunate to be one of these little tree lovers in pots. It's a good time. Thank you for listening in. As always, until next time, happy bonsai.